Hello, I'm Rev Brad, and you're listening to the Soccer Chaplains United podcast from the Touchline. During the month of August, we're going to be looking at some chaplain myths that are out there. These are comments, anecdotes, and myths that myself and other Soccer Chaplains United chaplains have competed up against from time to time, and I want to take a moment to address them. If you're a chaplain in sport or in soccer, or you've got an interest, this next series of pods might be just for you. And if you're in neither of those camps, well, you might be interested anyway to learn sometimes what a chaplain in sport, and especially in the sport of soccer, might be up against as we work and serve the people in the beautiful game. Well, we get the ball rolling right after this.
He's found the space, and he's found the back of the net.
Just a little off foot, thinking he's going to go far post. Not strong enough with his right hand.
Whips that one in. Far post, almost made him ends, and they have. He has the hat-trick, the second in his career, the third of the night, the hat-trick hero.
Talked about you're not going to be able to sustain that kind of pressure.
To the corner, goes towards the near post, and you're the angle, and what a goal! What a goal!
Today we're looking at another chaplain myth. This is the third one in this little series that I'm doing, but before we get into it, let's review what we've covered and tackled thus far. Myth number one, the best soccer chaplains are those who have played the game at a high level before. Well, we talked about it a couple weeks ago, and yeah, just like Mythbusters, feel like we busted this myth. Myth number two, if I have a Christian chaplain, I have to have a chaplain from all the other religions. And again, I gave last week a very, I think, solid defense as to why that's not necessarily the case. You know, if we were to categorize these two myths, at least from my perspective, those tend to be a bit external to the chaplain. The first myth about playing often comes from people who are fans, supporters of soccer. Maybe they have some link to faith, Christian faith. The second myth, I believe, comes more from coaching, management, ownership, people maybe unfamiliar with faith, maybe skeptical, hesitant, resistant to faith or religion. And so that's where I think those two myths are coming in. Today's myth, though, myth number three, is one that might be held by one of those groups of people, but it's a myth that chaplains themselves can fall prey to. So expanding the audience here a little bit, let me say to the chaplains out there, to the chaplains in sport, chaplains in soccer, the chaplains of Soccer Chaplains United, today's myth is one that we ourselves can fall prey to. We can start thinking or believing this for ourselves. Well, hopefully I've got everyone on pins and needles now. What's the myth, Rev Brad? Again, I think this could be vocalized or articulated in 1,000 different ways. To put it plainly, the myth goes something like this. A chaplain's prayers help to win games. Let me say it again. A chaplain's prayers help win games. Now, I've spoken a number of times on the podcast and elsewhere about the fanciful beliefs that chaplains in sport and others can tend to develop. It's those kinds of superstitions. We believe that a particular shirt we're wearing when the team wins is what we need to wear for the rest of our lives. Or if there's a particular pregame routine that we're into, we got to keep doing those things, believing this is a formula for success. I know a number of people who count out the number of Christians on a sports team, and when that team wins, they post it on social media, and they say a lot about how God helped that team to win. Maybe it's because the quarterback had John 3:16 in eye black, or the team had more players in a post-game prayer huddle at midfield, or for some other reason. It's sad to say, but even chaplains in sport can fall prey to this myth, to this superstitious belief that chaplains' prayers or our spirituality or the things that we do, those lead to wins. Now, chaplain may not say it out loud, they may not say it publicly, but deep down inside, I think there's a little part of all of us that gets tempted to think this way at certain points. Now, first, let me say off too. In the 23 plus years of working and serving in soccer as a volunteer chaplain, there's always a little bit of playful banter and teasing that goes on between chaplains, and I think that's fun and okay, and it's not what I'm talking about. Even this season, I traveled out with the Rapids to the first away match of the league season against Portland. It gave me the opportunity to spend some time with our chaplains that are out there serving the Timbers. And we've got a little bit of fellowship, a little bit of friendship. And when Portland came out flying and put up a quick 3 goals on us, the guys wonderfully teased me. Give this little clip a listen. I think I've posted it somewhere else, but give this clip a listen. I still have a snort laugh when I watch and listen to that little clip. When I hear those two jokers, of course, none of us believe that the Lord hears one's prayers over another. This, for me, is just good fun between friends. But let me talk about some of the dangers of carrying this myth, this idea that a chaplain's prayers, or as a Christian person, my prayers, the things that I do, affect the outcome of the game. They affect the wins and the losses. And it doesn't matter. You could be a Christian fan, you could be a supporter, you could be a staffer or a chaplain like me. I think it's really important to be mindful of what could happen as if we were to carry on this myth, this superstition. First of all, I have to give credit to former chaplain and friend Kurt Trempert. I think he once said it to me the simplest and best way. He expressed it this way: if you take credit for the wins, you've got to take credit for the losses too. I think this line of thinking is really helpful in keeping a chaplain or a Christian that's working in and around elite professional sport or any sport at all perfectly humble. If my prayer is responsible for the winning outcome of a game, well, what do I do then in the moment when a loss happens or when the team loses perennially? I live in Denver. We have a baseball team. The team has a chaplain. The team has never won anything. I think they were in the World Series once and lost 4-0, 4-0. What do we do in these moments? Is it down to the chaplain? Is he not praying hard enough? Should we question that person's relationship with God? It's nonsensical, to say the least. Number two, another thing to consider is what happens when they both have chaplains. When the Rapids won MLS Cup in 2010, our opponent, FC Dallas, also had a chaplain. Are we to believe that God was hearing my prayers over the prayers of the other chaplain? I don't know exactly what that chaplain's work and ministry throughout the days leading up to the Cup final or in the season were. I know the different stories and moments that I had with players and coaches and staff, but I don't question for a moment that the FC Dallas chaplain was present with his team, working, praying, supporting different people, and all in all, pointing them to Jesus. And I sometimes agonize over those in elite pro sports that make this an overemphasis on spirituality or religious things or the Christians. Chaplains or otherwise who are around in these high-pressure moments, it's almost like we pit one another against each other, as if God hears one chaplain's prayers more than another's, or God hears one team's Christian athletes better than another because there's more of them. Again, I think a bit of a nonsensical kind of aspect to this myth. Third thing I'll say, anytime that a chaplain or sports ministry person starts walking down this kind of road, well, it's a slippery slope. We can start to make this about me. And the truth is, it's really got nothing to do with us at all, but it is a temptation. And the more successful a team or athlete, or really anyone for that matter, there's politicians and entertainers and other high-profile people that have spiritual people that are in their camp or at their side. And I think that the more success that a person has, the more temptation seems to come. And I just say this: watch out for the celebrity pastors. Watch out for celebrity chaplains. They're after something. More power, more influence, more affluence. Be wary of the person who hangs about that celebrity pastor, that celebrity chaplain, because it's not the kind of road we want to walk down in thinking that our spirituality is somehow translatable to someone's success. It's just a difficult, dangerous, bad road to walk down. It's bad theologically, and it's bad for a number of reasons. Finally, I want to say this. There is some historical precedent for chaplains praying for victories. Back in the day, there's stories of chaplains, quote unquote, in and at and around the Roman gladiatorial games. They were called to come and bless the horses and the racers, the charioteers that were in some of these games. I think, too, we could look at different pages of Scripture, different moments, and we can see that priests and prophets were often engaged before, during, and after times of battle and warfare. They would come and bless the troops, or sometimes even hold the banner up, so to speak, for encouraging people to victory or overcoming some opponent or challenge. They stood there almost representative of God. So I do think that there are some things in history that we have to examine closely. We have to look at, understand contextually, and there might be specific application points, and probably, as with most things, there's probably a great number of abuses and misuses of faith and religion when it comes to sporting endeavors or other endeavors of battle or similar kind of competitive moments. And I think understanding these things appropriately can happen, should happen. And these things could shape our ministry in and around sport if we take some time to understand those things. And now, by now, one thing you know about me is that as I've been doing this series, it's not just trying to come out and take a myth and bash it up and destroy it and leave it just there. But I do want to offer some alternative ways of thinking, or to share some of where I've come as a chaplain in sport for these many years. So let me turn the page here a little bit and get into a bit more of the positive side of things. So part of this myth came out of, as people interact with me, one of the big questions they ask is, "Hey, Rev, do you pray for wins?" And when they see the grin crack across my face, if they know me, they know it's going to be a little bit more complicated and longer of an answer than just a simple yes or no. Or as my kids like to say, "Dad, you're being extra." So here's a little bit of extra. A few things. One, I do pray, and I coach and teach and preach, "Give us today your daily bread." Now, daily bread for athletes, for those in soccer, often does come in and through winning games, winning matches. A contract extension, a better contract, a better team, a different team, longevity in the career, in a game, in the sport of soccer comes when that athlete, that coach, that executive has results that are shown on the field. Individual performance in a team sport like soccer can be considered to a certain degree, but winning games ultimately are a massive determining factor. Now, of course, the prayer, "Give us today our daily bread," is always couched with "Thy will be done." It's up to God. The outcomes He uses sovereignly, wins and losses in a person's life, to accomplish His ultimate purposes. And I believe He invites us as chaplains and as Christians to ask Him for His favor and blessings, and also for the strength to go through the barren times, those moments when we don't experience wins, but we have more losses. Secondly, when it comes to wins and losses, I think many times we as humans, we just want to account for how do these things happen? Especially in the sport of soccer. You can see it all the time. A lot of ways we articulate it is we say that the game is cruel, or funny game, this sport of soccer, because a team can totally out-dominate, out-possess, outplay another team and still lose that game. So I think sometimes in our humanity, what we want to do is explain this. And in that same vein, we want to replicate success, and we want to mitigate loss, or at least explain it away. And the truth is, Jesus says this in Matthew 5:45. He says, "God the Father causes His Son, the Son, to rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and unrighteous." You think about it for a moment. Sometimes, and in some places, we don't want rain. Sometimes we live on the coast, and too much rain leads to flooding and leads to damage and catastrophe. But the farmer that needs the rain for his fields needs a certain amount of rain. Like that's a blessing for him. And those rains fall on people whether they believe in God or not. Same thing with the sun. In some places, too much sun leads to damage. It leads to drought, destruction. But we need sun. We need sun for things to grow. We need sun to lift our spirits, for us to be outside. Part of the reason I live in Colorado is because we see a lot of sunshine. We don't see as much rain. Sometimes we're praying, "Lord, send us some rain." Why does He send to seem at other places? Come on. So you get my drift here a little bit. For the Christian athlete, I think I think we can see and experience and receive the blessings of God which come through winning. But it's important, too, to understand that God also has purposes whereby others that may or may not believe in God, where they win as well. Some of those purposes might include drawing those people closer to himself, or maybe for some other reason. I could list maybe 1,000 reasons, but God's involvement with us in life, faith, and football, I think is often part of those ununderstandable aspects of his divine pleasure and purposes, which we may someday know, but for now are hidden to us. Now, let me say just one more thing. I do think there's some folks out there that argue that God doesn't care. God's not involved or interested at all in sport. And let me just say, okay, that's a different and much longer podcast. I can't get into all that today. Otherwise, I'd go way past the time, like I already have. Third thing, lastly, the Christian life is about tension. We're always between two extremes. We could say the winning extreme and the losing extreme. And thank the Lord sometimes, especially in soccer, we have ties, we have draws. We live and dwell in the midst of tension, life and death, wealth and poverty, faithfulness, faithlessness, today, tomorrow. The Christian person is a foreigner and alien in this world, yet we're called to live here and live out our life. Heaven and earth present two other extremes. You know, God doesn't just give us an out, quote unquote. We're called to live in the midst of this tension and to lean upon him for strength in dealing with and coping with and living out that faith. Well, friends, I've gone on a bit longer today, and maybe I've raised more questions than actually given answers for. But for my sports chaplain friends out there, be careful of the temptation in thinking that the wins are coming because of something you've said or done or some way that you've prayed. Yes, the Lord hears the prayers of the righteous. Yes, the Lord gives us our daily bread and everything we need. But my friends, we're merely stewards of a faith, and we must rightfully balance some of the tensions and not get too caught up in superstitiously believing that we're the cause of the team's latest winning or losing streak. Will God go with you? This is Rev Brad coming to you from the Touchline.